one day till the cousins arrive, and we have things going on. We have Nana and Lincoln. What are you doing, Lincoln?
Folding socks.
He's doing his laundry. He has help this morning. Nana's helping him. We have cleaners here. I'm excited about that. Ordered them through Amazon. That's a new service that Amazon has. It's under house services. So we're getting the house ready and clean. I'm getting ready to start baking, and Kenya is upstairs working on a few things. The excitement is building. Another beautiful day here in Colorado. So we're in the kitchen, and today the two big things, well, three big things I want to get off my list is we're gonna make my grandmother's cinnamon rolls. Even just mentioning it, and while I was reading over the recipe, it brings back so many memories of me being in the kitchen with Granny and always seeing her hands. That's the first thing I think of when I think of her, is seeing her hands always kneading the dough. Her cinnamon rolls and her dinner rolls were the most talked about in our family. Even as a little girl out on the ranch, Granny would get in the kitchen and she would always be kneading dough for the rolls, and I was always in the kitchen, and she would put me on the floor, and she'd put this little mat on the floor. She'd sprinkle flour all over it and give me a little piece of the dough, and she would sit there and she would teach me how to knead. And while she was making the rolls and putting them on the pan, she would let me sit there and do that. And she had these little miniature baking pans, and she would let me make mini dinner rolls, and she'd put them in the oven, and she would bake them along with all the other rolls, and it just made me feel so important and so part of the process. I'm so excited to be doing this, and it kind of chokes me up because I really miss her. But I'm excited to be doing this because this is how I still remember her every holiday, is by cooking. I'm doing a couple things that my granny did not do. She would make these the night before Thanksgiving, and then we would just heat them up on the day of. So what I'm gonna do is bake the cinnamon rolls. We're going to freeze them, and on the morning of Thanksgiving, we're gonna warm them up in the oven, and then I'm gonna frost them that morning. Same thing with her dinner rolls, just to help me on prepping for Thanksgiving. I can't be dealing with the rolls, so I'm gonna go ahead and pre-make the dough and let it rise and put it in the pans, and then bake them on Thanksgiving Day, but they're gonna be pre-frozen. That's a tip for you guys. Don't save everything for Thanksgiving Day. Try and get as much pre-work out of the way that you can. That way you can still spend more time with family on Thanksgiving, and you're not running all over the kitchen. I'm going to post this recipe down in the description, and I'm going to write it exactly how I wrote it out with Granny. When I went in her kitchen, I was about 18 or 19. I went over and I made these with her because the recipe was never written down. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I have all throughout my childhood. Okay, the first thing I'm doing is readying my yeast, or making the yeast ready. So I've got my warm water, I've got my yeast. I'm gonna add some sugar to the warm water really quick. So we're gonna mix the sugar in with the warm water, and then we're gonna use this to moisten the yeast here. Our next step, and Kenya's gonna help us here, is we're going to take our milk and add it into the pot and heat it up until just before it is a boil. You don't want it boiling, but you want to take it off the heat once it's just right before it starts simmering. So can you go ahead and do that? Pour, 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 fast, fast, fast. Okay, so our milk is almost to a boil, and I'm gonna go ahead and pull it off the heat. And we're gonna move it over, and Lincoln is gonna add our Crisco to the milk. So go ahead and peel it off the paper. Pick it up with your fingers carefully, and very gently set it in there, Lincoln. Just very gently. And now what we'll do is we'll stir this in until it melts, and we're also gonna add our salt as well. So we add our shortening, our sugar, and our salt.
I will pick the sugar.
You just pour it in. Okay, watch out. You can go ahead and add that in. Once all these ingredients are added and you've stirred and they are dissolved and the Crisco is melted, we're gonna let this cool down to not to room temperature, lukewarm. Yeah, as it says lukewarm, that's what my grandma said. She said baby bottle temperature. So you should be able to test it on your wrist and it should be lukewarm. So that's what we're gonna let this do once the Crisco melts and everything. So the milk, shortening, and sugar mixture is sat just for a little bit, and it's good to always have mother-in-law here to help me make sure that it's lukewarm. So
I did
she
this
told
years
me
ago. Nope, still too hot.
Okay. Okay, now that my milk, sugar, and shortening mixture is lukewarm, I'm gonna add it to my mixing bowl, and I'm gonna add in 2 cups flour and mix that really well. Once our milk and flour are nice and mixed really well together, we've got our yeast activated, and now we're gonna add this in and we're gonna incorporate it. Once again, we're gonna mix it really well into the dough. And now we're going to add our room temperature, already pre-beaten eggs to our mixture. Lincoln wants to turn on the mixer for me, nice and slow.
Stir.
Yep. Okay. We then go ahead and add in another 2 to 3 cups of flour. Once we get that added in, the last thing that we are going to do is then turn the dough out on my countertop, and we knead in the rest of the flour that we're going to need. So once we've got our dough all pretty much mixed, the next thing that we're gonna do, and I've washed off my counter and I love this new big counter, is we're gonna you can have a pastry board or some parchment paper, or if you have marble counters or a big counter area, my grandmother would just use her counter too. We're gonna flour this up. My granny always said, you're not having fun until your hands are messy. And the next thing that we're going to do is turn this out on the counter and add, I have to read my recipe, add our remaining 1 to 2 cups of flour. So we're going to knead our remaining 1 to 2 cups on the counter. So I'm going to take the dough mixture and turn it out on my surface, and the dough is going to look really runny right now, but don't panic because we're going to add in the remaining 2 to 3, and I'll get the rest of that out in a minute. So we're going to sprinkle some flour in here, and now it's kneading. And as Granny would always say, you don't want to over knead your dough, and this is where the guessing part comes in. She didn't have exact measurements, so we just kind of knead. And I'm not pushing too hard, but I'm just bringing it over on top of itself. And what you're looking for is the dough to firm up, but to still be sticky. And I'm going to call that good. It's pretty well good and mixed. I don't want to overdo it. And like I said, I'm fortunate to have done this with Granny when I was older, so I could remember how the dough was supposed to feel. And I think I even wrote it down what she told me. Dough should be soft and a little sticky. So now we're gonna get it in a lightly greased bowl. And we're gonna set it in a nice, dry, warm spot, and we're gonna let it rise until the dough is double its size. All right. It's perfect. So we're going to take our dough and we're going to move it into our lightly greased bowl. And we're going to put a tea towel over it and find a nice dry warm spot so our dough can double in size. So I've covered the dough with a tea towel, and we're going to take it. I found a nice sunny spot in my house, and we're going to let it rise for a little bit. So while the cinnamon rolls are rising right now, I'm going on to Granny's dinner rolls. We've activated the yeast. I've heated up the milk again, added the sugar and shortening, and now we're gonna add the eggs one at a time. And I apologize for any noise in the background, but there's lots of stuff going on called rehearsals for Mary Poppins. Once the eggs have been added and you've mixed for a little bit, you go ahead and add the 2 cups of flour and your yeast, and you're gonna beat that for about 4 minutes. And this flour is sifted. I have sifted it. And when you do put it in the measuring cup, you wanna use a spoon and put it in the measuring cup. You don't wanna scoop the cup in there because it packs the flour down too tight. And Granny made that very important to know. And we're adding our yeast, our activated yeast. Okay, I've added in the first initial 2 to 3 cups of flour in the mixer, and you should have a pretty nice dough right now. So once again, we're gonna pour it out on the counter or on a kneading mat that you might have, or a bread mat, and you wanna pour it out, and we're gonna knead in the rest of the dough. Now with these rolls, you don't wanna over knead it because it will make them tough. Okay, so we've got the dough in the bowl, and once again we're going to place it in a warm, sunny spot and let it rise until it's doubled in size. And I just checked our cinnamon rolls and they're good to go. So what I'm going to do is roll this into a 16-inch by 8-inch rectangle. Once we get this rolled out into a 16 by 8 rectangle, we're going to spread melted butter over it and then sprinkle the filling. And the filling is usually 1 cup of sugar mixed with 2 to 4 tablespoons cinnamon. And you mix that together and then you sprinkle it on the inside. Now that we've got them rolled, we're going to say 3 with finger. You can do 2 or 3. I do 3 because that's what Granny did. And we cut them. The next thing, once we've cut them, is we dip them in the butter, just lightly, and a little bit in the cinnamon and sugar, and then we place them in our pan. Okay, so now that we've got these in here, I'm going to set them kind of right here. I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to bake the cinnamon rolls. I'm not going to frost them. Once we have them baked and they've cooled down to room temperature, I will freeze them, cover and freeze them, and then Wednesday night we'll set them out to thaw. Thursday morning, I will get up early, reheat them in the oven, frost them, and we'll enjoy them. So we'll cover them with a towel and let them rise for a good 30 minutes. Our first set of cinnamon rolls has risen. So I'm going to put them in a 350 degree oven for 20 minutes, but I would go ahead and watch them. I would check them at around 10 to 15 minutes. Our dinner roll dough has doubled in size now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and roll it out on the counter, and I'm going to roll it out, cut it in half, and then roll it out that half section until it's about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch thick. And I take a circular cutter, we cut it, and then my grandmother would take a butter knife, dip it in melted butter, fold the dough over, and that's how we form the rolls.